project itself, the main thrust of of the project is to identify those promising approaches that intersect health equity outcomes with climate change action that present outcomes that are systemic, sustainable, and transformative. So our team explored successful community-led climate adaptation initiatives that were occurring across the globe. And really, we're also focusing on the potential for those lessons to be translated back to the United States. So we did interviews with community-led projects and organizations from every continent, as well as analogs within the United States. And we focus on 5 sectors that span the themes of climate adaptation and health: extreme heat, watershed management, food resilience, migration, and solar energy. So our research is really trying to understand those processes by which community-led programs are able to thrive and do the work in their local context. And the purpose of these webinars is to disseminate those lessons and create cross connections and exchange among practitioners, advocates, funders, governments, communities that are working in these spaces to elevate the issues and to also inform practice. And that's a key priority for the project. So as I mentioned in the beginning, this is one of 3 webinars. Today we'll be talking about extreme heat with our leads of some of the projects that we studied in the course of the research. In September, we'll have a webinar on food security, and then the final webinar a little later in the year, we'll look at community solar. So just stay tuned for more information on those future webinars. So now let's get to our esteemed and inspiring panel of change agents working in their communities to address the impact of extreme heat. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us during these interviews and today on the webinar. Each panelist will get a chance to introduce themselves, talk about where they're from, where they're at, and also give an overview of their work. And then we're going to shift into the Q&A portion where the audience can put questions into the chat, and then we'll use those questions to moderate the discussion. Eva, are you here? All right, would you like to get us started? Welcome.
Sure. Good afternoon, evening. My name is Eva Olivas. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of Phoenix Revitalization Corporation. We are a very grassroots-based group, and our organization focuses on helping residents get resources, skills, knowledge in order for them to advocate for change in their neighborhoods. So we've done a lot of work with the City of Phoenix Airport with regard to sound mitigation. We've done work with the light rail extension, the South Central Light Rail Extension, and the TOD plan, Transportation Oriented Development Plan. And then, you know, in 2009, we recognized that there was a huge heat impact in our neighborhoods. Literally, I got up one day and there were 8 deaths that week on, and we were very bothered because we're not a environmental agency, but we could clearly see our residents were dying. And so we launched a very simple campaign to remind people that in Arizona, if you're a native Phoenician as I am, summers today are not like the summers when I was a child. And then also, if you were new to Arizona and they told you it was going to be hot, it is much hotter than they said it was going to be. And so with that campaign, we really wanted to start from the individual and their personal responsibility to take care of themselves and their neighbors. So we did a campaign that talked about understanding the signs of heat stroke, encouraging people to have first aid and CPR classes. We told them don't leave children in cars, don't leave animals in cars, don't eat food that's been in cars. Very simple, basic campaign that we started. We launched that in 2009, and then it ended in 2020 due to COVID, obviously. And then after that, we were able to connect because of our leadership development work with the Nature Conservancy. And I feel very privileged to be on this call with Baltazar Hernandez with the Nature Conservancy, who then kind of adopted us and gave us a lot of education and really helped us expand the efforts that we were doing in combination with their goals or mission of their agency. So that's kind of what we have done. We have partnered with them, and I'm gonna not take away the Nature Conservancy's glory because they're an amazing group. So I'll let him expand on that. But what I can tell you is that our focus has truly been on the individual person. We work in predominantly low-income areas. We did do a box video on the lack of trees in our areas that directly connected it to the areas of poverty. And we've worked with the community in adopting community gardens and supporting those community gardens. And we did a campaign with the Union of Concerned Scientists, and we passed out 250 umbrellas, really good level umbrellas that really protected them from the sun. And so that's kind of our mission, is what are the things that we can do to help our neighbors save their own lives and then save the lives of the neighbors, doing wellness checks. And so that campaign went really well. And then since COVID, we've been working in partnership with the Nature Conservancy to continue our mission, our goal as it relates to heat. So
Wonderful. Thanks, Eva. Keep doing the great work.
Mm.
All right. So we're gonna move to Balthazar.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're based. My name is Baltazar, and I'm with the Nature Conservancy in Arizona. I work on our Arizona Healthy Cities program, and I lead our grassroots capacity building work in collaboration with community-based partner organizations. And honestly, the Nature Conservancy is only able to do our work effectively by having great partners such as Eva Olivas from Phoenix Revitalization Corporation. I grew up in Metro Phoenix, and today we have a high of 107 degrees Fahrenheit. I think that's currently where our temperature is right now. It's 4 p.m. And I just wanted to do some sort of background into Phoenix in case you all aren't aware about just our geographic region and where we're located in the United States. So we are the hottest large metro area in the United States, and urban heat is a big issue for our geography, and it's affecting our health, our safety, our comfort, and economic development. And this is projected to worsen over time. In July of 2023, we saw some of our hottest temperatures, and we had record-setting temperatures actually in the month of July of 2023. There were more than 30 days with above 110 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. And urban heat affects quality of life of all Phoenicians. However, neighborhoods only 2 miles apart can have up to a 13-degree temperature difference. On average, the hottest communities have higher rates of social vulnerability and a lower tree canopy coverage. The inequitable tree canopy coverage is rooted in the racial redlining practices that accompanied the unequal development of neighborhoods in Phoenix. And heat is a leading cause of weather-related death in the United States. And in 2023, 645 people died of heat-related illness in Maricopa County, which is where we're located. And our work was born out of a participatory heat action planning process that the Nature Conservancy engaged partner organizations in, called the Nature's Cooling Systems Project. Phoenix Revitalization Corporation was a partner in that effort, in which we engaged with residents across 3 neighborhoods in Phoenix in order to identify residents' challenges with urban heat and to learn from residents about their visions for cooling their neighborhoods. Now, you might be familiar with the Nature Conservancy's work that is focused on conserving ecologically significant lands and waters on which all life depends. In 2014, the Nature Conservancy decided to expand its work in cities and bring nature into cities. Our urban conservation program seeks to increase and maintain healthy tree canopy cover in frontline communities in the Phoenix metro area. And we do this in collaboration with many community-based partner organizations. And so that gets me to our work on our Urban Heat Leadership Academy, which we launched in 2021 with Eva. and Phoenix Revitalization Corporation. And so the Urban Heat Leadership Academy is a program that I co-manage with Phoenix Revitalization Corporation, and which is a free 5-month-long program that is offered for free to Maricopa County residents, and it's offered in English and Spanish. And our program is a capacity building program which equips residents living in the hottest neighborhoods with the skills to advocate for heat mitigation solutions, including nature-based solutions and built environment solutions that reduce heat. We have graduated more than 100 participants who have gone on to advocate and mobilize for heat mitigation solutions in their communities. Our graduates have implemented projects such as tree plantings in some of the hottest communities in Phoenix. And we're currently in our fourth cohort and are planning to continue to offer this program in the next few years. And so that's a little bit about our experience. I'm looking forward to sharing some insights into our work and our urban conservation work in Phoenix and with our partners around Phoenix.
Great. Thanks, Balthazar. Now we can move on to Candace Jordan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. So I'm from the city of Melbourne. Not sure how familiar people are with Australia and our capital cities, but so city of Melbourne, we're a relatively small capital city in terms of geographic area. Our municipal boundary, we're about 35 square kilometres. We have a relatively small residential population. But we have nearly 1 million people come into the city each day to work, visit, and study. So we're a small area, but we have a lot of people come in and use the municipality. So a lot of our planning looks at both residents, but also supporting our community that visit the city too. So a bit about myself and the team that I sit in. So I am the climate change adaptation lead, and I sit within the climate change and city resilience branch within the organisation. And our role is very much looking at dealing with the physical risks from climate change, so extreme heat, flooding and drought. And in my role, I provide strategic and technical advice to help adapt our assets, operations and services. And I have a very strong focus on adapting to urban heat. We focus on both built environment solutions and also nature-based solutions. We've got many partners within the organisation that deliver work in that space. In terms of the work that we're currently focused on, we have some heat safe city principles that guide our work. We have 10 principles that sit under 3 themes. And the first theme is around helping people to prepare for heat waves. And so this is very much focused on how we support communities to adapt and build resilience, with a particular focus on our most vulnerable communities. The second theme is around cooling the city and boosting thermal comfort. And so that focuses on the built environment and how we plan, design the city, and also our nature-based solutions. And then the third theme is around adapting our operations and how we work at council. So this one focuses on increasing staff capacity and capability to reduce heat risk, and also making sure that we're prioritising the most vulnerable people in our community, in our decision-making, and delivering programs and services that reduce heat risk for them in particular. I wanted to just touch on a project that we've run over the last 12 months called the Heat Lab. This project, we received funding from Emergency Management Victoria, so our emergency organisation within the state of Victoria, to deliver this project. And this involved rapid prototyping of heat risk reduction interventions to test over our summer period. And what we developed and tested and what we would learn from that, we would take that, and that would inform what will become standard practice or scaled up for future summers at the city. So we implemented several service and infrastructure pilots across 6 intervention types. The first type was cool places, so the provision of 10 cool places for community members. And we did this through 3 different models. One was through council facilities, our libraries, extending hours during heat events. One was through a small grants program offering small grants to community service organisations to operate a cool place out of their own facilities. And then one was a partnership with a health organisation to operate a cool relief pop-up targeted for people experiencing chronic homelessness or sleeping rough. And that was out of a council-run facility. We also did a series of outreach and engagement. We provided cool kits with practical, low-cost cooling equipment, and also ran heat smart sessions providing education on heat safety. And that was, those interventions were targeting our most vulnerable again. We did a technology trial with a platform called a heat risk platform called HeatSense, and this was to aid our decision making and operations. So when to activate different interventions, where our high risk neighbourhoods were to target interventions. So it really informed how we delivered the interventions across summer. We also did a series of collateral and communications, so some heat-safe pocket brochures and geo-targeted social media and comms posts in our highest heat risk neighbourhoods. We did some creative engagement, so we recognise that heat doesn't have the same visual cues as, say, a flood does. So we wanted to try some different creative solutions to raise awareness, and we did this through something called the adaptation game, which is a tabletop facilitated board game. Started rolling that out with the community, and also did some artistic programming. We partnered with 3 artist collectives across the city to do different workshops and things like that with community around heat. And then finally, our last intervention type was infrastructure trials, where we trialed some surface treatments and shading infrastructure. So this was focused on non-nature-based solutions. We've got a whole program of work in our urban forest space, water management, which looks at nature-based solutions. So this was really around those more built solutions. Just a few quick things in terms of outputs. We provided over 1,000 cool kits, distributed over 4,000 brochures. We had 18 HeatSense champions across the organisation, utilising the risk platform to inform our services and events and communications for summer. And we had over 4,300 social media impressions, which shows that we were getting really, really great reach through those communications. In terms of the delivery of the project, we reached many stakeholders and community members across the city, and our service interventions focused on people's health, wellbeing and social connection. And feedback from community show that the interventions have had a positive impact, and the resources, particularly the kits, the brochures, the things that are quite tangible, that they were very helpful. And it also, I think importantly, it made them feel valued and supported, and so that they're actually recognised that as in need members of our community. The delivery of the physical cooling interventions, the shades and surface treatments enabled us to model different ways to plan and design the built environment to improve thermal comfort, especially in constrained urban settings, which a lot of our city is, we're retrofitting rather than starting from scratch and new. And I think just a few things about the lab itself. It really allowed us to experiment and trial some different things. It enabled us to be flexible and adaptable to changing circumstances. And it also optimized collaboration across council teams, but also with external delivery partners. So I think that was one of our main lessons from this project, that collaboration is key, that we can't do this on our own. And so leveraging existing relationships, partnerships, but then also existing programs, services, facilities is crucial to delivering heat safety solutions across the city. Yeah, and so yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, Candace. Thanks so much. I mean, we're just taking notes on all of the strategies and interventions, so that's amazing. And last but not least, we have Emma Bacon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emma Bacon. I'm the founder and executive director of Sweltering Cities. Sweltering Cities is a national organisation in Australia that works directly with communities who are impacted by extreme heat. So people who live in hot homes and hot suburbs or work in hot workplaces around the country. We sit at the intersection of health, inequality, and climate change. We're a health charity, but we sit really clearly like at those intersections. I started Sweltering Cities with other people because there was a really clear gap in Australia for organisations who were doing organising advocacy campaigns on this issue. One of the key problems is that in Australia and maybe lots of other places, heat is seen as an individual problem. You know, it's your problem if you can't afford to turn on the air conditioning. It's your problem if you can't walk down the streets too hot. It's your problem if, you know, you're at a hot workplace and you can't tell your boss that, you know, it's too hot because you're worried about losing your job. And it's like, you know, if the problems are individual, then the solutions are individual. But if the problems are collective, then the solutions are really big and ambitious and transformative. So that's really the purpose of what we're doing. We started in 2020 in Western Sydney. So I'm from Sydney, I live in Melbourne at the moment. And Sydney is a really big sprawling city with with a coast on the side. Western Sydney is home to 1 in 10 Australians. It's really diverse. It's got a lower socioeconomic profile than other parts of the city. And it's very sprawling and hot, lots of big urban heat islands, treeless streets, things like that. You know, in January 2020, Penrith in Western Sydney reached, I've done the translation for people, 120 degrees Fahrenheit. But there's also been higher temperatures over 122 degrees Fahrenheit measured on the ground. So that was Bureau of Meteorology. 120. So this place gets like seriously dangerously hot, but so do lots of other places in Australia. It's an extremely hot country. In January this year, Western Australia, one day on the other side of the country, one day, the 15 hottest places on the planet were all in Western Australia. And so, you know, these are really harsh conditions for people that are only getting worse, driven by climate change. One of the big pieces of work we've done over time is run summer surveys around the country with thousands of respondents, getting that quantitative and qualitative data about how people are feeling the heat in order to raise that collective consciousness and get stories into the media. In the last summer, we focused on cost of living impact. So how does cost of living and climate change intersect to be causing health issues? In order to like say that the cost of living solutions have to be climate solutions and vice versa. And found that almost 2/3 of Australians say that cost of living concerns are making it harder for them to keep cool. We found 65% of people were also saying that they couldn't afford, like there were concerns about costs that were stopping them turning on air conditioning. So that's a real hub of our work going into this summer. We have 4 solutions we talk about, and this is from our community consultation. The first is safe homes. So that's both regulation for renters and things like that, but also, you know, making sure our quality of housing improve, retrofit programs, things like that. The second is cool suburbs. That's everything from trees, public transport, green and blue infrastructure, things like that. The third is services and support to make sure no one's left behind. You know, in Australia, 90% of people who die during a heat wave are people with disabilities. And so there needs to be really targeted programs to make sure that, you know, those target groups aren't left to suffer alone because it's treated as an individualized problem. And the fourth sort of bucket of solutions that we added on later is justice and participation. And so that's making sure that people have a say in the way their city's designed, the way their neighborhood's designed, but also things like union rights to make sure that, you know, workers have OH&S protections so that they're not at risk of work. We've got 3 big pillars of work. The first is community organizing directly with people who are impacted. When Eva was talking about the things that her organization is doing, I was like, that's, you know, there's some really strong parallels to like that pillar of work that we do. Really geographically based work. The second big pool is storytelling. You know, in Australia and lots of places around the world, it's, you know, record heat, and the picture of people on the front page is pictures of people at the beach. This is a big problem because it doesn't tell the story of the fact that heat waves are the deadliest environmental disaster in Australia. They kill more people than all other disasters combined. And this is in a country with really dangerous fires and floods as well. So we're doing like lifting up stories of lived experience to make sure that's what's reported on hot days. And the third pillar is around strategic campaigns. So finding campaigns with community, things that are broadly felt, things that are tangible, things that are winnable, and things that change the way we think about extreme heat. I'm just going to give some very quick examples of what they are. So something we've been working on in Victoria, where I'm living at the moment, is putting cooling and insulation in the rental minimum standards so that renters who are more likely to live in low energy efficiency homes, more likely to be at risk. Like renters came to us and said, like, you know, it's just dangerously hot. People are doing things like lying on their kitchen floor, you know, for the day with an ice pack, on their chest because that felt like the safest thing to do in their home, or riding trains all day because they didn't feel safe in their homes. Candice, as you were saying, works in the geographic, like the CBD, the Central Business District of Melbourne, but Melbourne is actually a sprawling city, the Greater Melbourne of 5 million people, and the edges are those big urban heat districts that have a huge amount of risk for people. Another campaign we've been doing is we have our social services system at a federal level, we call Centrelink, and during fires, floods, storms, and pandemic, they pause penalties for Centrelink. So it means that, if you're not applying for enough jobs, if you're not turning up to work, work services and things like that, all the systems we do to sort of punish poor people for being on welfare, then, they pause penalties so people don't get their payments cut off, because it's acknowledged that they've got to be taking care of their safety, of themselves and their friends and their family. They don't do the same for heat waves. So we've got these situations where people are walking down treeless streets, they're waiting for bus and they're getting heat stroke, just trying to get to, appointments that make sure their payments aren't getting cut off. And so they're having to choose between financial security, at a already really low income level, or following heat advice. So we're trying to change that at a federal level, so people can put their health first. And I'd say the last thing to mention is we have a campaign in Western Sydney to win really great bus shelters in hot suburbs. Because bus shelters are effectively public infrastructure that's been privatized through the advertising industry. So advertisers own the shelters, and councils, they're no longer a cost item for councils because advertisers run them. It means that in richer areas, there's lots of bus shelters, and in poorer areas, there aren't, especially suburban streets, even in places around schools, hospitals, things like that. So we're trying to get the state government to fund that, to address the infrastructure inequality across the city, and also demonstrate that, climate change, extreme heat means that these everyday activities are actually now sites of risk, sites of danger for some of the people that, are driven to live on to use public transport for a range of different reasons, whether they're an older adult, whether they're a kid going to school, whatever reason it is. But also, this is a really clear climate solution. We need to be shifting from a car-driven society to a public transport-driven society for the climate. I'm going to leave it there because we've got all these other things we're doing, but I thought that is sort of a bit of an overview of our work. Yeah.
That was excellent. If anyone else is not as inspired as I am, I'm just not sure what's going on. Have you been listening to this? So thank you all for sharing this breadth and the background around your initiatives, your programs, your campaigns, really generating just a lot of ideas and excitement as we speak, right? But we can also see how much innovation and experimentation is involved with these interventions. But the approaches are really diverse and adapted to the local context, but really coming from the same sort of underlying values around protection, particularly of those who are most at risk, particularly of those who are most vulnerable, but also collective action and seeking collective action and justice to then scale up to levels of change. So now we're going to transition into the Q&A portion. Karen and Will are going to take over, and then we will wrap up from there. So you're on mute, Karen.
You'd think I would know that by now. I guess we could start with any questions from those who are listening, who have questions for the speakers. If anybody wants to unmute or type a question in the chat.
Hey, I can start first. Hi, everyone. My name is May. I'm a PhD student from FSU, and I've been currently just now working on a few research that is related to heat mitigation, and so I'm doing a evaluation of city plans for how efficiency they are to mitigate the urban heat. And I noticed something is some plans are effective in the short run and some are effective in the long run. Like, for example, use electric cars to replace gasoline cars. So those might be effective in the long run, and like planting trees and green roofs. And so when we are really doing like actions for heat mitigation, what is the prioritize, or like what's your opinion? Just open it up. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm happy to start with this one, coming from a city perspective. But you're exactly right in terms of we do see that across cities that we need, I suppose, we need long-term strategies, and we also need short-term strategies. So from City of Melbourne's perspective, we see our urban forest strategy, which is a 20-year strategy, and we're actually entering our second round or second phase of urban forest precinct plans. So they're the sub-plans to that, the implementation plans. So we have one for each of our neighbourhoods. That's our long-term strategy to address urban heat island effect and suppose cool the city. So it's, you know, around got a target of, say, a goal of cooling the city by 4 degrees. But as you've said, in terms of time span, we plant trees, you know, we plant 3,000 trees a year, but they don't reach their full maturity for, say, 5+ years. And so we're lucky that we have a healthy urban forest at the moment, but in the meantime, there's that equity issue of we plant a tree now and it doesn't reach its maturity for another 5+ years. What can we do in the interim to help cool the city and support our community? And so that's where some of those other short-term initiatives or built environment initiatives are important: shading, surface treatments, misting. So how we design the city and plan a city. So yeah, there is I suppose it has to be a combination of solutions to address it both in the short and long term because of that equity issue. Another long-term solution, we're doing some planning scheme changes, and that's to address many environmental sustainability standards, but urban heat island is one of those. And so having regulations around how to design and what materials are used in buildings is another sort of long-term strategy. And we're also doing that internally with our designing for climate change. We've got an assets policy that we're developing and developing some standards alongside that. So yeah, it has to be a combination because yeah, some of these things, I mean, the cars was a good example as well. Removing cars, taking back car road space and converting that into open space. These are something that take time and gradually occur. So yeah, there needs to be that combination of that. And then those sort of service interventions that we do to support the community in terms of the cool kits, the awareness raising, the education. So yeah, it has to be a combination of things that, yeah, different stages that, yeah, short, medium, long-term strategies. But yeah, I'll let Emma and Ava answer that as well.
Yeah, go ahead. Emma, if your comment was building on Candace, and maybe you want to flow right from that, and then we could go to Ava.
Oh, mine's on something quite different.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
Ava
and I
can-
think Eva had her hand up first.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to add to that. So the work that we do is very immediate, meaning, you know, we know that people are dying. We had 528 people die approximately in 2023 throughout Maricopa County with, you know, related to heat-related illness or death. You know, one of the things that we struggle with is that Arizonans, we have these great 7 months of weather, and then we fry like an egg in a pan. And what happens is that we have forever had the practice of enjoying those great months and then experiencing the other 5 months of extreme heat instead of preparing for those heat months during the year. One of the things that I think that has to happen is there has to be a message that is driven year round about the impact of heat on you as an individual. And seems like we talk about it in the summer, but we're not talking about it in December or November, saying, get ready, it's coming. The other thing is that, there's no denying that the impact of living expenses creates some of these situations. In Arizona, the cost of electricity in the summertime with AC units is just amazing. And we have seniors who live on fixed incomes who have their utilities off, or they don't use them even if they have them because they can barely afford them, if at all. So, I mean, living expenses is really, this is a long-term solution that we need to solve right away. And I'm going to give you two other quick examples of things. For example, in the Nature's Cooling System project that we did with the Nature Conservancy, one of the things that they stated, the residents stated, the particular neighborhood had a splash pad. It was the only cooling station there was in the entire neighborhood, which never worked. And so it was not maintained by the city on any regular basis. And even if for some reason there was some, people who did damage to it, it was not repaired on a timely basis. And so that was one of the things that the residents really advocated, that this is the only place our kids can go out and cool themselves. There was a second conversation we had about, we talk about bus stops, but we don't talk about the school bus stops, which are different than the public bus stop. And then one of the other things is that the city, and they do have a minor or major home repair program, but if you apply for a minor or major home repair because your AC went out today, it will take you 5 months to get that thing repaired based on the processes that we have in place right now. So addressing some of those systems in order to more timely react to things to save lives. And probably one of the other things I just want to mention is that there's a lot of conversation about the heat, which is certainly our priority, that the impact to health. But there's not enough conversation, I think, on the social and the emotional impact that occurs when you literally have to isolate yourself in your home for months because you opening the doors like opening an oven. So I just think that we don't talk enough about the emotional impact. So that's my very non-environmental answer.
Well, really, really interesting, really important point to make. Emma, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about heat shelters really briefly, but I also want to say, like, that's something we think about a lot, like the emotional and the social impacts of heat. Like, we know that domestic violence goes up in the heat. We know that suicidality goes up in the heat. We know that, people tell us that it's that isolation, the depression, anxiety, and it's like that feelings of the heat, but also at the same time that lots of medications like antidepressants, antipsychotics are less effective, but also might put people more risk. And there's this whole social element of it that I feel like, anyway, it's obviously a whole thing, but I wanted to mention heat shelters, or we call them cool, safe spaces, which are, it's hard because, heat, like the experience of risk is really acute. Like it's when it's hot that it's happening, but the drivers of risk are structural. And so like, it is simultaneously true that we need cool places for people to go if they do not feel safe in their homes or they're unhoused and they're not safe. But at the same time, that solution gets worse and worse and more inadequate over time because of the length of heat waves. Like more people will be impacted. Like, as I mentioned, like Western Sydney has 2.5 million people. Like, what is the plan? Like for those people to have heat shelters, especially when lots of the most vulnerable and most at risk groups can't get there, like it's not welcoming to them. This is where questions around racism come in, around like who is welcome to spend time at cool places for extended periods of time. In Blacktown in Western Sydney, the shopping centers people go, but if you're young, if you're a person of color, if you're homeless, if you're Aboriginal, like the security guards are gonna move you along. Like that's what happens to people. And so I think that this is a hard thing around the long and short term, because in the short term, people need places to go. But like heat shelters are driven by, it's not a pull factor. People aren't being pulled to somewhere cool. They're being pushed out of their home. And I think that like, we just need to make sure that we are not, these are disaster response, like heat shelters are a disaster response, but like they're not an adaptation response. They don't help us thrive in like the future. So I think that's the long and short term of saying like we need to like address the acute risk, but we need to reduce the risk over time. Like the long-term goal should be reducing the risk.
Baltazar.
Yes, I'd like to respond to May's comments and questions about maybe priorities for cities in terms of how we prioritize maybe some of the short-term versus long-term solutions to addressing the urban heat island effect. And I'll just present sort of our sort of perspective working at a science organization and how we maybe leverage some of the science around the nature, like nature's benefits for cities and how to address the urban heat island effect in cities. Um, we kind of approach this at a twofold sort of approach, and I'm focused on the grassroots sort of capacity building and getting residents involved in order to make change locally and advocate for change through their stakeholders and decision makers. But we also approach this on a sort of policy scale as well. We're focused on really promoting nature-based solutions amongst stakeholders. And so one of my colleagues who's on the call, Michaela Cutlip-Chen, is focused on working with the 10 largest municipalities in the Phoenix metro region. And so we are a very sprawled out area. And so this means we do have to do our work in collaboration with cities across our region in order to really meet our goals at scale. And so we are focused on ensuring that our local municipalities are equipped with this science and with this knowledge in order to make decisions that are in the interest of both nature, but also in the interest of people. And one example of that is we're working on ensuring that the 10 largest municipalities in the Phoenix metro area are articulating tree canopy goals in their climate action plans or in their heat mitigation plans. And so we are focused on also mainstreaming some of those solutions and making sure that we are convening stakeholders and putting these as policy priorities.
Thanks, Baltazar. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Feel free to raise your
Yeah, I had
hand.
a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Just for Candace or anyone that relates, I'm Catherine, by the way, and I'm a student, but I'm also currently in an internship with Sweltering Cities, working with Emma. And for Candace, you mentioned the Heat Lab was doing like, or had done creative engagement or artistic workshops, and we are looking at potentially doing something like that in the future, or like just seeing if anything like that is possible. I was wondering just if you could expand a little bit on what those workshops aim to achieve, and also what you thought like the impact of that was, and if it was very useful and very successful, kind of.
Yeah, sure. So I can talk about the artistic programming first. So yeah, this was really about trying to be more, I suppose, do storytelling differently, because as Emma mentioned about, we see a lot of visuals of people at the beach and things like that when it gets hot, and that's not what the sort of practice we want to encourage. And also, yeah, there's no visual cues for heat waves or extreme heat like there is for floods, or even drought or storms. So try to do something a bit different in terms of more creative storytelling. So that was why we explored doing something different and engaging some artists. And so we worked with 3 artist collectives who all worked in different mediums as well. So one produced zines, which are little mini magazines, and they ran a series of workshops with, I think they mainly work with youth. So we also used the artistic programming to reach audiences we don't usually reach, we find hard to engage and reach as a council. And so, yeah, youth was one of those. We also worked with Kings, who do more writing and poetry, and so they ran some writing workshops and developed up some stories. Again, with people that we don't usually engage at council. And then we also ran a film challenge with Melbourne Women in Film Festival. And so that was a competition. So people could register, budding filmmakers could register to that and create a little mini film. And so it was a way to reach audiences we don't usually reach, but we also were able to produce some different artistic material that we can then use in future communications, little short videos, some little graphics, things like that. So it's just a different way to tell a story around heat that people themselves have created. So I suppose it's also, it's them generating a message which will hopefully be effective. And then the adaptation game was the other initiative we kicked off. And so this is a tabletop facilitated board game that Amble Studio, an organization in Melbourne, have developed. And it's basically a way to start conversation. So it's 4 players plus a facilitator sitting around a table. You've got a local map of your area. It's really about localizing the impacts and therefore empowering that person to make decisions for themselves about how they'll adapt to those impacts. And it doesn't just have to be heat. It can be flash flooding, water security, and so on. So it's a really great way to get people to engage on climate change and find pathways to action that's not very confrontational. Climate change can be a very emotional issue. And so finding a way that, people can more easily engage in a local way as well that's relevant to them, and then finding solutions and also connecting with people in their local neighborhood or their community. It's a great way to establish some connections as well. So that's what when we're with the adaptation game, we're looking to roll out more gameplay sessions across the course of the year, looking at running things in our libraries, potentially partnering with universities and other external agencies. So that's an ongoing initiative that we're running, and actually hoping that it's a sort of thing that can enable communities to self-mobilize. So we'll have kits, board games available that people can train up and be a facilitator and play it with their own communities. It doesn't need us to run it. They can self-mobilize themselves. So yeah, that's I've got the evaluation report. We did a whole evaluation of the Heat Lab project. I'll pop the link in the chat so people can access that on our website. It's got a bit more detail about what we exactly delivered and the outcomes and lessons that we learned as well.
Great, thanks, Candace.
Perfect.
And
That
thanks.
also-
Emma also
Yeah.
posted, I just wanted to point out, anybody to look at the chat. Emma posted something about a music dance program as well. You had a follow-up, Catherine?
Yeah, sorry. I was just gonna ask, in that link, I'd love to see it, but also, would there be any way we can see like some of the art submissions or poetry submissions that were put out as well? Would that be in the link too?
We haven't got that in the report, but I'd be happy to share with you some stuff that we've developed. I can gather up a bit of a package and share that with you.
Cool, thank you.
Will, did you have any comments or questions for the panelists or the?
Well, I mean, I think
Mhm.
the question that's at the center of all of this, if we're looking at 2 different continents, 2 different sets of activities and approaches, but in 2 very, very hot places, I think I draw inspiration from this in part because I think there are lots of places that aren't quite as hot yet. You all are on the front line, sort of like we are in Florida with sea level rise, right? We're sort of experiencing it now. It's a here and now situation. This is not a future phenomenon of climate change, but lots of other places are getting hotter and hotter. And so you all provide this sort of extraordinary suite of wisdom and insight, everything from individual stories to build to a collective action, to think about short-term and long-term. We have the immediacy and urgency of people dying now that needs to be addressed with something quick, right, and not get tied up in bureaucratic minutia and process. and it's only getting worse, so we have to be thinking about those longer term sorts of trajectories and solutions, and the intersection between the social and emotional as well as the physical health impacts is another theme that comes out of both places. So I think there's this extraordinary cross-continental wisdom that you all have, basically leading, on the leading edge of trying to address these heat challenges that these communities face in very unequal, inequitable kinds of contexts. So that was me buying time to see if I could come up with a question there too, because all I'm doing is just drinking this in and really, really enjoying learning from these experiences and this wisdom. I mean, I guess the thing that strikes me is, despite the fact that heat is not got this visible, you've got lots of people who experience it, and yet on both sides, you had to work on building awareness of heat and capacity to address it, both individually and collectively. What was that sort of, what were those initial hurdles to get people to really pay attention to the reality that was a very lived experience of heat that was, challenging their very well-being?
Happy to go. I would say to begin, it is much easier to convince individuals to be heat safe than it is to convince government to invest in really simple solutions to help protect people. Like in conversations we can have with community members about what they can do and support each other, like, are really productive. Like, we ran over summer a heatwave check-in program where we encourage people to use existing social structures, friends, family, colleagues, social media, anything else, to promote like calling people who might be at risk, but also reaching out to people over summer. Like, that went really well. People were really keen to talk about it. We called it like call your nan, that sort of thing. But I sit in meetings with politicians who live in who have air-conditioned offices or don't live in hot areas, who are decision makers, and you say, we need more bus shelters. People are frying, just trying to like run an errand, and they say, it's not my responsibility. We say, like, you need to make sure people aren't getting their social services payments cut off during heat waves. And they say, but like, that's really hard. And it's like, there are decision makers and policymakers who say, oh, that's really hard. And like, it is not as hard as like walking down the street with your child, like worried that like they're going to get sick walking to the park. Like, that is not as hard as like questioning whether you can like do your food delivery job, like riding around on a bike, like, or whether you'll be able to pay rent. Like, it's not as hard as that. And so I think that like, we do a lot of work like collectivizing the issue, but like communities are way more ready to step up than decision makers are, in my experience. That's my like radical point of view though on this.
Well, I'll just follow on from that saying, I actually do agree that that is a huge challenge, because in Australia we don't classify heat and heat waves as an emergency like we do bushfires and floods. And so yeah, it's not recognized, it's not given the same level of, say, governance and emergency management arrangements. But really, yeah, it's risk management to do, adaptation is risk management. So really, I think, we talk about here that really pitching it as it's managing our risk as a local government and for our community, so our asset services and so on. Giving it that risk lens, I think, has a bit more traction. But Emma's absolutely right that, yeah, a lot of the decision makers, it's funny that you say, they say, oh, we can't do that, that's too hard or something, when in reality they actually are very simple solutions, around public infrastructure. But they're much concerned with other sort of priorities, or what they deem priorities, which might be considered very much more political. So it's, yeah, it's policy and politics, and so trying to juggle that can be quite challenging. But I agree that, yeah, I think community are much more aware, and they're much smarter than I think people give them credit for as well. I think we tend to sort of dumb things down, but they know what they know what their challenges are. They know what what solutions can help them as well. And so actually working with them to support that, I think, yeah, is where we can have more impact. But yeah, in Australia, it's definitely government's more the challenge than, and I'm part of that, but government's more the challenge than the local community.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. And I think there's sort of a recognition as well from our graduates of our Urban Heat Leadership Academy. So we do finance heat mitigation projects after our program. And so our graduates have gone on to run and operate cooling centers in the summer. Some of our graduates have gone on to plant trees in communities, and others have planned educational campaigns around heat and around tree plantings. And so particularly the project that focused on operating a cooling center in the summer, they realized that this was very much a sort of piecemeal, very like patch sort of solution, and doesn't really address these structural challenges that include addressing heat and its challenges in the city, and how the city is built, and how there's a lack of shade in specific areas around the city. And so there really needs to be a focus on addressing those structural issues. But I think the conversation in Phoenix has moved from heat as just happening to us and as an issue that just happens to us, and more toward there are solutions that governments, that individuals and communities can also advance.
Something I might just actually quickly add as well is, sorry, is that we, like Phoenix, Australia, we're a hot place. And I think there is that also that perception of, oh, well, it's always been hot. That's how summers should be, but they're actually getting worse. And it's also the nature of our building stock is of very poor quality in Melbourne and probably Australia as a whole. So it's that intersection of climate, weather, and our built form and systems and so on that exacerbate the risk. And so I agree, structural issues and system issues really need to be addressed to overcome that. Because yes, it has always been hot in summer, but it's going to get worse. And we don't help. We need to plan appropriately for that. So yeah, I'll finish on that.
Okay, thanks. We are right at 8 o'clock, and I just want to sort of close off on one quick, like 1-word or 2-word answers. What keeps you all hopeful?
Can go. What keeps me hopeful is community power.
This is Eva. I believe in the wisdom of the residents we serve.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go along the same sort of lines in terms of community, and we have a very, very progressive community here that care, and I think that counts for a lot in terms of delivering action.
Yeah, I would say people and partnerships in this work.
Awesome. Thank you all. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for setting up and participating in this really informative and thought-provoking and urgent discussion, quite frankly. And 1,000 thanks to you all for the excellent work that you do. We've learned a lot from you today, and we also sort of see where the challenges are, where more road has to be paved, but it's a cool pavement. I just want to say that. And sort of what works and what just needs to continue to be pushed to become effective. So I'm going to close off the webinar now. Look forward to our next Sustainable Healthy Futures webinar. It's going to be about food security on September 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You guys have a great night, a great evening, or a great day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.